You just paid a bill your daughter should be paying, and you did it without saying a word. Your mama called this morning about her Medicare thing, and you handled that too. Then you sat down, opened the retirement app you've been avoiding for a year, saw the number, and closed it faster than you opened it. My name's Franklin, and today we're getting into what's really happening in the minds of Black Gen X folks looking down the barrel of 50 and being told to start over, as if you were ever handed a start in the first place. Because when somebody says start over at 50, they picture a fresh page, a clean slate, maybe a little breakup, a career pivot, a big vision board with candles on it. That's not what's happening in your house. In your house, you're rebuilding on a foundation the country never poured, while still carrying 2, 3, sometimes 4 generations on your back. And the wildest part, the research says you're actually holding up better than you have any business to. Let's start with the money, because the money is where the pressure starts before you even open your eyes in the morning. Gen X is the first generation in American history that got shoved into do-it-yourself retirement. Your parents, if they worked a real job long enough, might have had a pension. Somebody sent them a check every month for being alive. Then, right about the time you got your first real paycheck, that whole system got yanked out from under the floor and replaced with a 401k, a little plastic cup at your job that you were supposed to fill up yourself with money you didn't have. While paying rent, paying a car note, and paying for a kid or two, you picked whatever fund had the friendliest name and moved on with your life. That was the retirement plan. That was it. Fast forward. According to Northwestern Mutual data cited by Kiplinger, Gen X on average didn't even start saving for retirement until age 32. Millennials started at 28. Gen Z started at 22. So before we even talk about race, Gen X as a whole started the race a full decade behind the kids coming up behind them. Now add the second layer. The National Institute on Retirement Security, in a report Forbes ran, found that nearly all Black and Hispanic Gen Xers have less than half of what they need saved for retirement. Not a little short, less than half. And Schroders' 2025 U.S. retirement survey put the average Gen X retirement savings gap at over $400,000, the biggest gap of any generation they surveyed. Same survey said 43% of Gen X are planning to file for Social Security early because they're scared the whole thing's going to run out of money. 26% said they're straight up terrified of not having a paycheck. So when a life coach on the internet tells you to reinvent yourself at 50, you already know what your bank app looks like. You're not reinventing, you're recalculating. And here's where the picture gets bigger. The savings gap is one layer. On top of it, you're still writing checks today at 50 that somebody your age in 1955 wasn't writing. Let me paint the scene. You're standing in a kitchen you might or might not own. Your phone buzzes. It's the group chat with your siblings. Mama's blood pressure medication is out again, and somebody needs to run to the pharmacy. Your daughter, who's 26 and has a whole degree, texts you underneath that asking if you can Zelle her $150 for gas until Friday. Then your job emails to remind you the quarterly report is due at 5. All of that hits in the same 90 seconds. You handle it. You always handle it. The research has a clinical name for the person doing all that at once. I'm not going to use it because it's played out, but the numbers on it are wild. An analysis of CDC BRFSS data published through the NIH found that 31% of Gen X are actively caring for both a child and an aging parent or grandparent at the same time. For baby boomers, that number is 6%. So you're doing 5 times the double duty your parents' generation did at this same age. An AARP Public Policy Institute report from 2023 dug further. Of the people doing this dual caregiving for older folks on Medicare, 35% identify as Black or Hispanic, way above their share of the general population. And 74% of them are also working a full-time or part-time job on top of the caregiving. 74%. So it's a job, a parent, a kid, and whatever's left of you at the end of the night. Now here's where the topic bends in a direction you might not expect. Because if you look at all of this on paper, The retirement gap, the caregiving load, the wealth statistics we're about to get into, you'd predict mental health should be in the basement, depression through the roof, anxiety off the charts. That's what the studies expect to find every time they open the file. That's not what they find. Researchers have a name for it. They call it the black-white mental health paradox. A study using data from the Health and Retirement Study published through the NIH found that older black adults consistently report lower rates of clinical depression and anxiety disorders than white adults in the same age range. Despite more stress, despite more discrimination, despite less money, the clinical numbers come back lower. And it gets more specific. There's a study also through the NIH that looked at black caregivers doing that double duty, kids and parents, versus black caregivers only caring for one generation. You'd think the ones carrying more would be doing worse. Wrong. The ones carrying both reported better self-rated health and less frequent mental distress than the ones carrying just one. The prevalence ratio for good health was 1.15. Mental distress was 0.90, meaning more load, better report out. Now, before anybody runs out of here saying, see, we're built different, pile it on. Pump the brakes. The researchers themselves say something important. Part of what's being measured is who's getting diagnosed and who's not. Healthline reported, using APA data, that fewer than half as many black Americans seek mental health treatment compared to white Americans. Wake Forest University put it in a range. Fewer than 10% of black Americans receive mental health counseling or treatment, compared to over 18% of white Americans, and only 2% of psychiatrists in this country identify as black. So some of that lower rates number is really lower diagnosis rates because the pipeline to get diagnosed in the first place is narrow, and for a lot of folks, expensive and uncomfortable. But there's still something real underneath it, something the numbers can't fully explain away. Call it a stubborn kind of steady, the ability to sit inside a situation that would flatten somebody else and still get up and cook dinner. Call it a pattern the research keeps finding over and over in study after study. So when you're standing at 50 looking at what a start over is supposed to look like, understand this: you are the demographic that scores highest on carrying weight without breaking. Don't romanticize it. Work with it. Now let's talk about the house. Because for a lot of folks in this audience, the whole retirement plan quietly became the house. If I own the house, I'll be all right. Kids can inherit it. Worst case, I sell it and move somewhere cheap. Here's what the National Association of Realtors put out in their 2025 snapshot of race and home buying. The gap between black home ownership and white home ownership has actually widened since 2013. It's now 28 percentage points, meaning for every 100 white households, way more of them own their home than in every 100 black households. And that gap is worse now than it was over a decade ago. Same report, black mortgage applicants get denied at a rate of 21%. For white applicants, it's 11%. So even when you show up with the paperwork, you're twice as likely to get told no. Then look at NAR's 2024 profile of home buyers and sellers, reported through Mortgage Point. Get this, 49% of black home buyers today are first-time buyers. Almost half, meaning a huge chunk of black folks becoming homeowners are just now, in 2024 and 2025, starting the clock on building housing wealth, not inheriting a paid-off house from grandma, not stepping into equity somebody built for them, starting. And 42% of those buyers are carrying student loan debt into the closing. On top of all that, that same profile shows black homeowners tend to carry higher homeowners insurance costs than other groups. So when a financial guru on TV says your home is your biggest asset, for a lot of folks in this audience, your home is your only asset, and you're still paying the down payment off in your mind because you just got in the door. The Center for American Progress pulled Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances data and reported this. Median wealth for black Americans ages 55 to 64 was $18,900, less than 7% of the median for white Americans in that same age bracket. And that's median. Half of folks in that group have even less. Brookings ran a more recent look at the same Federal Reserve data. Some good news, Some bad news. Median black household wealth went from $27,970 in 2019 up to $44,890 in 2022. That's real movement. That's people grinding, paying things down, buying homes, getting educated, moving up. But in the same window, the gap between black and white median wealth hit its widest point on record, meaning you ran faster and the finish line moved further. And if you zoom out to all Americans 55 to 64, the Federal Reserve data shows something that tells you exactly why the house is my retirement plan is fragile. 78% of people in that age range own a home. Only about 57% have any retirement account at all. So most people your age are house rich and account poor. A whole generation whose money is stuck in a building they can't spend. All right, take a breath. Let me pause the numbers for a second. Before I keep going, I've been working on something on the side. A book called Psychology of Black Gen X Men. It gets into the stuff that got wired into you young and what it's doing to you now. The patterns you can't quite explain about yourself. Links in the description if you want to look. And to everyone watching and sharing this stuff, genuinely, thank you. Now, the other thing that hits at 50 that people don't say out loud, the relationship recalculation. Psychology, today, in a 2025 piece, laid out something they've been calling gray divorce. Divorces among adults over 50 now make up roughly 36% of all divorces in this country, over a third. And for people over 65, the divorce rate has tripled since 1990. Think about what that means. Your parents, if they split, mostly split when the kids were young. That's the version you grew up around. This is the opposite. This is people making it 25, 30, 35 years in, and somewhere around the time the last kid moves out or the parent they were caring for passes, sitting across the table and realizing they don't recognize the person they've been sitting across from. For this audience specifically, the pressure is different because when black folks get married and hit 20, 25 years, there's a whole community narrative built around that. It's held up as a victory. To dismantle it at 50 in front of everybody takes something the culture doesn't really give you permission to do. So a lot of folks stay long past the exit, and when they finally do go, they're going with less financial cushion than any other group in their age bracket, which is why the psychology of a black person choosing to leave at 50 sits in a different place than a magazine article about empty nest divorce. It's empty account and still going. And this circles back to the mental health paradox, because a lot of what looks like resilience is really, I'm going to say it plain, decisions that got made in silence, never talked out with a therapist, never talked out with a friend, just decided in the car on the drive home from a job you don't love that you were going to keep going. That's a coping style. It has costs, and it also, for a lot of folks, works. So when we talk about starting over at 50, understand what actually needs to start. Your personality is fine. The systems around the personality are what need a redo. Let's get concrete, because we've been in the sky a long time. Let me bring it down to the kitchen table. Starting over at 50 for this audience looks like 4 things mostly. 1. Renegotiating what you owe to who? The Zelle to the adult child, the bailout to the sibling, the just this one time that became every month. If 74% of you are still working while caregiving, according to that AARP data, something has to give, and it can't be your body. So the conversation is, what am I actually responsible for? And what did I just inherit because nobody else raised their hand? That's math, not selfishness. 2, getting honest about the retirement number, not the fantasy number, the real one. If Schroders is telling you the average gap is over 400 grand, you don't close a gap that big by clipping coupons. You close it by making a plan for what your actual life looks like at 65, at 70, at 75. Maybe the plan is working longer, on your terms, in something you actually liked. Maybe the plan is a smaller house. Maybe the plan is moving. But the plan is not figure it out later. Later got here. 3, the house question. If you own, understand what it is, an asset you live inside, and understand it doesn't spend like cash. If you're a first-time buyer at 50 and you're one of the 49% NAR is tracking, you are not late. You are starting. Different word, different feeling. Starting means the clock begins now, not that you missed it. 4, the mental piece. This is the one that trips folks up because the research says you're holding up better than expected. But better than expected was set by researchers who expected you to fall under a load nobody should be carrying in the first place. So the bar is on the ground. Making it through doesn't mean the weight is fine. If fewer than 10% of Black Americans are talking to somebody professional, and the paradox is masking real cost underneath, at some point, somebody in your life needs to be somebody you can actually tell the truth to. Call it maintenance. And here's the through line on all 4. You're not starting from 0 at 50. You're starting from a foundation you built yourself on top of ground that nobody prepared for you. While carrying people the country decided were your problem. When somebody looks at your account balance and says you're behind, they're comparing you to a race that started 10 years earlier with a pension, a paid off house from their parents, and no student loan attached to their daughter's degree. The scoreboard is the problem. It was never built to measure what you were actually doing. The redirect at 50 is about finally spending some of your energy on you after 25 years of spending it on everybody else and doing it without the guilt they trained into you when you were 12 years old and already helping with the bills. That's the psychology piece nobody puts on a magazine cover, that the starting over is the first time in your adult life you might get to make a decision that isn't a reaction to somebody else's emergency. And that's a version of freedom your parents mostly never got to taste, which is why when you finally do it, when you finally take that trip or move to that town or start that little business or leave that thing you should have left 10 years ago, you're being the first person in your line who got to. Quick thing before I go. Psychology of Black Gen X men came out of doing this channel and realizing all these topics connect into one bigger story about how you got built. So to everyone who was able to get it or anyone thinking about it, thank you for supporting the channel, genuinely. It's in the description if you want to check it out. Catch you on the next one. There's another one right there on the screen. Go on and tap it.